This game was won by Wolf. And here's the water spout. Wolfie Click is your 2016 Pokemon video game world champion in the Masters Division.
That could be me. I don't know if you've ever had that thought before, but I certainly have. If you have, I wonder if you've taken your first step towards that goal. Do you remember how your first tournament went? I remember mine. Let me tell you all about it, because it certainly was... He might have beaten us last time, but he didn't go undefeated to get here. That means that he can bleed. And if he can bleed, we can make him bleed. Something, to say the least. The craziest part? It all happened because of one mistake. A mistake so small that everyone forgot about it in less than a week. Even the person who made that mistake. Everyone except for me. Since that mistake probably changed the course of my life. But before we get to that, let's see how I got there. Remember that whole "that could be me" thing from not even a minute ago? Yeah, that wasn't my first time. In fact, by the time I saw that match live, it was the 4th World Championship in a row that ended with me having that exact thought. This time though was different for 2 main reasons. Firstly, it was the first time I had watched the World's Finals away from home. Huh? Oh, no. I wasn't at Worlds. It would have been impossible. That year, so many people qualified for Worlds that they didn't allow spectators unless they were family members of competitors. I was back in my hometown. In my car. In a grocery store parking lot, waiting for my brother to finish his shift. The other reason why it was different was because I would finally be able to try to prove that I could stand on that stage. Why now, instead of any previous year? Well, I'm glad you asked, imaginary person. After 2013's finals, I honestly wasn't that interested because this was basically all I remembered from it.
And Arash Omati is our first Italian world champion.
It's really no wonder that he nerfed sleep and powder moves immediately after. Even if I was interested though, I couldn't drive for myself, and asking my parents, hey, can we go on an 8-hour trip so I can play in a Pokemon tournament in order to go to my closest regional would go about as well as you'd expect. Worlds 2014 was when I properly fell in love with VGC. Sure, seeing Sejong win Worlds with Pachirisu was cool, but unlike the previous year, I had watched more sets than the finals, and those other parts of Worlds left a much stronger impact on me than the finals. A nail-biter between Gavin and Arash was a perfect way to kick off that year's championship. Sejong's Swiss set looked way more impressive than the finals, and his interview explaining why he decided to run Pachirisu instead of Amoonguss was very interesting. While I could finally drive now, I was also working in a grocery store part-time and couldn't really take time off easily between that and school to go to regionals. So instead I decided to start learning VGC for fun. I started reading team reports on Nugget Bridge, the main website for VGC resources at the time, and started watching Alex Ogloza's YouTube channel religiously. After playing for a month or 2, I even managed to hit top 500 on Showdown. Worlds 2015 did very little to change my perception of the game at that point, but if there's one thing I want to note, is that the Seniors Worlds Finals is probably the first set where I distinctly remember thinking, I wish I was as good as that guy, and remains one of my favorite VGC sets to this day. Then came 2016, and I lost interest. If you played back then, you know why the format was controversial. I had one single reason why as a casual I stopped playing. And no, it wasn't even a restricted Pokemon. It was Smeargle, ironically enough. Between Moody, having to deal with Dark Void, and trying to guess its held item between Choice Scarf, Focus Sash, and Mental Herb, it turned the format into something that felt extremely frustrating to play, so I decided to not touch the format. So, what made this season different? Was I finally free from working weekends? Not yet. But by next spring, I was going to start internships. And during that period, I would no longer be working weekends, allowing me to attend many tournaments later in the season. While looking for how to qualify, I also found out that there would be locals near me that I would be able to attend, which would be much easier to take time off for. While we're on the subject of qualifying, I'm gonna ask you to sit down past me and prepare your notes, because I'm gonna teach you how to qualify for Worlds. To qualify for the World Championships, you need to obtain a certain amount of championship points. In 2016, that number was 350. For 2017, that number went up to 500. They wanted to avoid the issue they had in 2016, so they overcompensated by making it the hardest year to qualify for. There are 5 different kinds of tournaments, 2 types of majors, the middle child, and 2 types of locals. Every type of tournament has a different best finish limit, where only the best results of your participated tournaments count towards your points total. They also have a kicker, which is a sign-up requirement per age division for certain positions to start giving points. I'll take the 2017 Premier Challengers kickers as an example. Top 8 points had a kicker of 16, which meant that they needed 16 sign-ups to start giving points for 5th to 8th place. If there were 15 Masters in a Junior, for example, the kicker wouldn't be met, since points are treated separately for each age division. If that Junior was a Master though, the top 8 finishers would get points instead of the top 4 exclusively. Majors have 2 types of tournaments, regionals and international championships. Oh, right, you don't know about it. But the national championships were replaced by the international championships. They're basically continental championships, with a total of 4 of them in a season. Well, 3 nowadays. Rest in peace, Oceania Internats. While it wasn't confirmed why this change happened, it probably had to do with what happened at the 2016 South Africa National Championships, where 2 German players went there because it was going to be a small tournament, and both of them ended up in the finals. Not much for you, really. Not like you can afford the money or time to go to more than the North American International Championships. For the European players though, it meant that instead of having the UK, Italian, and the German nationals, they only had the European International Championships happening in London. About that, the payouts were significantly nerfed after 2016, with multiple positions awarding less than half of the previous year's payout. The only change is that the BFL was changed from 1 to 4, which, yeah. And let's not talk about the kickers. Let's move on to the regional championships then. Regionals' main buff comes from the BFL going up by 1 and no longer sharing its BFL with mid-season showdowns, a type of local. Nope, we're not. There are only 3 regionals we can go to. Collinsville Regionals, which was happening during spring break. Toronto Regionals, which we could drive to on a Friday evening. And Madison Regionals, which would be happening after we'd start internships. We're not going to miss school for VGC, since we're at least somewhat responsible, and we're not made of money. The points payout was increased for the top 2 finishers. For the positions lower than that, though, payout is lowered, but not by much. And once again, let's avoid talking about kickers. Don't worry, it gets worse. Even the best players have bad tournaments. And you're a rookie. You're definitely going to underperform at least once, especially with kickers as brutal as those. Well, you're putting the blame on me, but it really was just as much your decision as it was mine. If your goal is to be the best, who cares how hard it is? Just be that good. Also, yes, that's you in the future. You can't change that. You can just choose to put enough effort to make sure it doesn't become a habit. Madison Regionals would be a gamble since you don't know if your internship would allow you to take time off for the regional. But you'd already know by that point of the season if you have a shot of making Worlds or not. So you could just give up on it if you don't. Are you really going to comment on every single thing I say? Come on, am I really arguing with myself? Of course I did. Let's just move on. Select online competitions, known as international challenges at the time, global challenges today, or the reason why VGC players need therapy in both cases, are tournaments that are so brutal that they break even the most seasoned veterans. They're the only way that Japanese players can qualify for their nationals. If you think you get it, wait until you lose to a Pokemon you forgot even existed. Like Xerneas. Oh, right. It isn't out for you yet. Not like your reaction would change if it was anyway. The championship points payout was increased significantly compared to 2016, and they didn't share a BFL with Premier Challenges anymore. But with the amount of games it requires you to play in a weekend, the fact that we might have another tournament the same weekend, and that I would be focusing my energy on getting better at best of 3, I had no clue if I could rely on those points. I'm not going to spoil every single thing you went through right now. Can you just try to live your life instead of having it be told to you every single step of the way? Look, I know that you want to move on to the tournament and are getting bored of this, but we're not going to get there faster if you keep interrupting. Now let's move on to locals. For locals, one thing that will matter for both of them is the fact that they split the season into 3 sub-seasons that they also call seasons. To keep everything clear, I will call those splits from now on. The first type of local tournament is mid-season showdowns. In 2016, they used to be hosted 1 per TO per season. Now, not only has the BFL gone up from 3 to 4, but having a separate BFL from regionals made them pretty valuable despite the lower payout. Unlike PCs, a TO could host an MSS once per split, but they could only host them in the 2nd and 3rd splits. Hard to say, really. I'd say getting more experience certainly helped. Last and certainly least, we have Premier Challenges. They're the lowest level of tournament you can play in, and TOs can host them once per month. The points payout is probably the one that was hit the hardest, with winning one awarding 2/3 of the points that winning one used to give. Don't worry, it gets worse. Premier Challenges had a unique quirk for BFLs for 2017. While 2016 had a BFL of 6, 2017 technically had that too, but instead of a direct 6, it was set as a BFL of 2 per split. Yes, it means that you will have to play VGC 2016. You will have to play VGC 2016 and you will enjoy it. You will enjoy it way more than me having to deal with your That brings up another question about locals. How can I find them? What? The event locator? The event locator. Oh, wait. You're actually serious. Give me a moment to explain why the event locator is and how most people find their locals. I just need the music to kick in. The event locator is pretty much an internet explorer of local finding. Sometimes, organizers don't really know they can host an event until the very last minute, so at times, it might look like you don't have any locals near you when there is a TO. They just haven't been able to enter the event yet, and you can't find any info on your local scene unless there is a tournament planned. Most of the time, players use Discord to find out about them. There will be in the description a sheet with as many local Discord communities that I could find. Thank you to everyone who contributed. The way I found out about it was by taking a day off to visit a league that was supposedly hosting both TCG and VGC in my hometown. The organizer explained to me that he used a Facebook group to tell players in advance when the events were going to be hosted. When it came to VGC players, only a few seniors who were mainly there for TCG were present. They still gave me a few practice sets that I comfortably won, and they helped me test a mechanic involving Encore and priority moves. If you click Encore into a Pokemon that just used Protect, and it used a non-priority move on the turn you used Encore, the Protect would come out at +0 priority. That made me curious about if I used a +0 priority move with a Kangaskhan and Side Encored while clicking Sucker Punch. Would it give the regular move a +1 priority that turn? Turns out that it would! I walked away that day with 2 new figs, info on when locals would happen, and a potential win condition that could be useful in a pinch. I could get a quick idea of what kind of opponents I would run into at regionals and internationals since most of the heavy hitters are showcased on stream, but that left me with a big question. What would my local scene look like? How scary were the players going to be? As a whole, Canada was a country with a lot of strong players. Toronto, British Columbia, and Alberta all had players with major tournament results. Even Manitoba had someone who qualified for Worlds that year. I won't go into detail for each of them because I'm not going to be facing most of them at locals anyway. Where was Quebec in those results? There was one notable name that I found with big results. Kelly Mercier-White, who had some good showings at a regional and the 2014 UK Nationals after he moved to Ireland. When it came to players still living in the province, there was only one name that came up that seemed like a potential threat. Sébastien Biagé, who ended up being one set away from qualifying for Worlds at US Nationals in 2016. This left me completely confused on what to expect. Why were there so few results from here? Was the scene just that small? Or that bad? Or was it something completely different, like the language barrier creating that much of a barrier of entry, or the fact that the closest regional was on average an 8-hour drive away, a drive that you'd likely be doing on your own if there was little to no scene in your area? There could have been more results, but just couldn't be found since results in that era were way less documented than they are nowadays. Spoiler, there weren't. One thing that most areas that had a lot of successful players had in common was the proximity of events. That made me think that there was a chance that there might be some strong players that no one knew about since they couldn't travel. That meant that I could not take my locals lightly. No matter what the reason was for the general lack of results, one thing was certain. If I was going to reach my goal, I would simply have to perform better than anyone else that came before me, and reach heights that no one from my area had been able to until now. Becoming a real-life trainer! To be ready, I had one big problem that I needed to solve in order to best prepare. Finding a place to get some best of 3 practice. Nowadays, it is very easy to find tournaments on Limitless or just by using the best of 3 ladder on Showdown, but at the time, it wasn't easy. I found Pokemon VGC group on Facebook that happened to have frequent tournaments that I could participate in. So with that solved, it allowed me to start tackling the final problem I had to solve. Choosing a team. No matter how I think about it, I don't think I can approach a subject without getting into one of the most ancient debates in VGC. Should you use Teal or build a team? If you need to ask, you really should do both. Both have their pros and cons, but newer players really get the most benefit from doing both, even if I'm pretty sure that most veterans do both anyway. Building your own team has the following advantages. It is normally tailor-made to your strengths. The fact that you're the one making every decision behind the building process means that you completely understand the reasoning behind every decision on the team. From move choice to EV spreads to what kind of synergy the different Pokemon in the team have. The fact that you have built the team also means that your opponent is much less likely to have practice against it or general game plans. However, getting used to stealing teams is something that I think should be done as soon as possible because it's a skill that's learned over time. And the sooner you get to it, the earlier you can get used to it. As for the advantages of stealing teams, a big one that I remember from a 2016 team report on Nugget Bridge that has been lost to time was someone using Big Six on ladder and using the games that they were losing as an inspiration to build their team. If your team is your thought process on what you think is your best way to win games, then stealing a team is basically looking at someone else's view on their best way to win games. That means taking advantage of different strengths than your own, forcing you to learn to approach a game in a way that you might not using your own teams, and if done well, opens up your options in team building by helping you understand Pokemon that you might not have understood as well before. Only using your own teams can easily become a trap where you force yourself to constantly approach a game in a specific or similar way, and stealing teams is something that can help with fixing that by broadening your horizons. One more reason why, especially in modern VGC with the constantly changing formats, is that sometimes you can be too busy to build a team that's at a satisfying level of performance for you, and you would be better off by not reinventing the wheel and just pick something that's already had success that you know you could use well. Once you have friends that you can build and practice with, helping them test by using your teams can be also counterproductive, either because they're likely not going to run into that team, or you might not want them to have experience against your team. Back to the main point, would I go with my own team or still a successful team for my first tournament? Well, I quickly realized two things. One, I'm too monkey brained to be able to use positioning heavy teams that did very well at Worlds. Thinking multiple turns ahead while factoring multiple outcomes of a turn is something that's overwhelming for a new player, and it was something that I was aware of. And while it didn't stop me from trying teams like that, I was self-aware enough to know that I was not good enough to use them to their full potential. It was something that was so noticeable that I even remember someone on the showdown ladder telling me, "You're trying too hard to win the turn. Try winning the game instead." Which was probably the most important bit of advice that I've ever received while playing this game, and it came at the perfect time. 2, I'm pretty good at making high risk, high reward reads, especially in the best of 3 setting. Part of why I was trying to win the turn so much was because of confirmation bias, since I was generally getting the reads every turn correctly. This made me lean towards the main archetype in 2016 that rewarded simplistic, read-heavy gameplay, Xerneas.
You might have heard of "if it ain't broke, don't fix it," but that doesn't apply to Xerneas. No, if anything, the reason why you don't fix Xerneas is because it is broken. Power-up Geomancy means that you're getting 2 stages of speed, special attack, and special defense in a single turn, making an already good Pokemon absurdly powerful. I didn't even know how to EV spread it, but the best part is, it doesn't even matter. It's so good that it does its job well no matter how you train it. I went with max HP to help its bulk and get set up in the first place, max special attack modest to hit as hard as possible, and then dump the remaining 4 EVs into speed.
Groudon was a bit of a weird one in comparison. I decided that I wanted to use a special variant of Groudon since it meant that its moves would be 100% accurate. Eruption dealt a lot of damage. Earth Power was a solid backup option for damage and allowed you to KO most Groudon since I was running Modest with max special attack. Protect is self-explanatory, and the final move was Hidden Power Ice to help against Rayquaza and Mega Salamence. I went for enough speed so that I could outspeed Mega Salamence after a Dragon Dance if I was intelligent. However, Dragon Dance Salamence was not a real set at that point of the format, but that amount of speed was enough to outspeed most opposing Groudon, so I didn't really think of revisiting it. The rest of the EVs were dumped in HP. For my choice of Mega, I went with Kangaskhan, since when I tested the most standard variants of Xerneas, I almost never brought Salamence and heavily preferred Kangaskhan. I went with Scrappy instead of the more common Inner Focus to help against a Gengar matchup, and went with Power Up Punch instead of Low Kick because I would often feel like I didn't put out enough offensive pressure after denying opposite speed control and setting mine, which was bad since it meant that it wasn't too hard for opponents to stall it and prevent me from setting it up again. With Power Up Punch, I was able to pick up KOs or force opponents to KO my Kangaskhan to let me switch into threats in the back safely. I went with enough speed to outspeed Smeargle by 1 point to win the Fake Out Wars against it unless it was Scarf. And if it locked itself into Fake Out, that was usually good for me. Max attack because I'm a huge fan of dealing damage, and dump the rest in bulk. Whimsicott was my premier choice for speed control. Originally, I wanted to use it to abuse Fake Tears alongside my 2 special oriented restricted Pokemon, But I realized that it wasn't actually winning me any games, and was instead helping me win games I was already winning more easily. That's cool and all, but usually if you can instead have a move that can win you games that you'd otherwise lose, you go with that instead. Safeguard was the best reason to use Whimsicott, since Prankster Safeguard was the best way to deal with any Smeargle variant, since Sash, Scarf, and Mental Herb usually each require different counterplay, but not with that. Encore helped against Xerneas as it made him have to play more carefully and forced Trick Room setters into weird positions. Endeavor was cool since Moonblast wasn't really putting any significant pressure, especially not compared to Endeavor. And Tailwind is obvious. I went with max speed and put the rest in the defenses to maximize Endeavor efficiency. Up next was Cresselia as another form of speed control. If for some reason I thought I would need Trick Room, Cresselia would be the way. It was a weird set. Max special attack wasn't something that you saw too much. Psychic was coverage up against Wolf's team since Psychic helped cover against Gengar and Hitmontop. Skill swap was something to help with maintaining weather control, and to help with that, I decided to go with 84 speed Cresselia at level 50, an idea I took from Jonathan Heavens' team report that I would underspeed Primals by 1 point. I'm not really sure why I picked Moonlight as the last move, as letting it survive longer doesn't really help in any way. Ice Beam would have made more sense to help against Mega Salamis and Mega Rayquaza. As for the 6th, that was more complicated. I had no idea how to complete the team and tried many different things that I never brought. For a while, I was even laddering with nothing to complete the team. Most of my losses didn't really feel like they were due to matchup, and because of that, it didn't really feel like I needed anything. That was until I played against Logan, a friend of mine that I had roped into VGC. I didn't know his last name outside of the initial or what he looked like, but I knew that he liked green and Charizard. So until I meet him, let me represent him with this green Charizard render from Smash Bros. We frequently laddered on call together, and this time we decided to play against each other for practice. And he destroyed me. It wasn't close. There was nothing I could do to his Whimsicott. A weakness to Prankster and Whimsicott wasn't something I wanted to deal with, so I started to think of what I could do to fix it. I remember our brother standing next to me when I was thinking about it, and for some reason, I decided to tell him about my problem. No, he doesn't play VGC, nor does he follow it in any way. He is a Pokemon fan and knew about some memes, one of them being the Talonflame or Smogon Bird memes. And because of that, he just told me Talonflame. Originally started laughing, but after thinking about it, I realized he was actually right. I could go for the KO of Brave Bird before it could do anything, and if for some reason I couldn't, I would still be safe thanks to Quick Guard. So I went with those two moves, Taunt and Tailwind, since I wasn't going to be bringing Whimsicott in the matchups where Talonflame was coming. I went for a Jolly Nature with enough EVs to outspeed Whimsicott, since the only other things that I could outspeed from there were Yveltal, which I hadn't run into in practice at all, and getting the speed tie against other Talonflames, which wasn't worth it in my opinion due to the decline in popularity. As for the rest of the EVs, I think you all know how it went. That's right, max the attack and dump the rest in bulk. I went with Sharp Beak since I wanted to hit harder, and not using Life Orb was useful for two reasons. First, it helped with survivability since I didn't take 10% of its HP as extra recoil, and the fact that the item wasn't shown meant that I could fool the opponents into thinking that I would be running a different item like Lum or Chesto Berry. After more practice, I ended up being more fond of the Talonflame and Kangaskhan mode, and started using Whimsicott mainly for matchups where my opponent had Smeargle. I was becoming very comfortable with the team, and I felt like I could do well at the upcoming PC. I went to check the event locator, and I saw there was another event that appeared, a PC in Montreal happening on the 15th. I wasn't going to ask for time off since it was a 2-hour drive each way, and I had no idea if it was even going to be worth it for me points-wise or learning-wise. I accepted that I wasn't going to be able to go to that PC since I had never had a weekend day off unless I explicitly asked for it. On Friday, I went to check the schedule, secretly hoping that a miracle would happen, but accepting the reality that there was no way I could go to the... It happened. It somehow happened. To this day, I have no idea how it happened. But my guess is that they somehow messed up and thought I had asked for the 15th off instead of this 22nd and only realized too late. But I knew one thing. That was a sign, and I was going to make the most of it. It was fate. I was supposed to go to Montreal, and now I was going to make the most of it. I was excited I would have the opportunity to go to my first tournament event earlier, and paid closer attention to the event's details. I saw very quickly a detail that was going to be different from the Get-No event. Before I explain the adjustments I was going to make for a best of one scenario, I might as well talk about the two phases in a VGC tournament. There's the Swiss phase, where a certain number of rounds are played where you are randomly paired against someone with a similar record as you, and the single elimination phase, commonly called TopKec, where the players at the top of the standings, the exact number is based on the number of entrants, play in a single elimination bracket, with the results in Swiss deciding the seeding. The way I saw it, best of one meant that my team would likely want two things to have a clear advantage. Try and counterplay against gimmicks, and sprinkle in a few gimmicks of my own. There were a few changes that I decided to make to the team. I was going to run a mixed Groudon instead of the special one. I felt like a more standard set would be less likely to put me into weird positions in a best of one format. Fire Punch and Precipice Blade were a given, and I decided to go with Overheat to help against the odd Ferrothorn and Aegislash to remove mind games involving King's Shield and to not be hit by Iron Barbs. And usually against both of them, I wouldn't need more than one Overheat to do the job. To help with Groudon's lower accuracy picks, I was going to run Bronzong with Gravity, and to help deal with gimmicks, I was going to go with Hypnosis. Using Bronzong instead of Cresselia would also help against opposing Xerneas. And for the last one, I was about to do something I don't think people expected me to do. But for someone who was serious about having good results, I didn't care. I chose to sign a contract with the devil. And lastly, I was going to replace Whimsicott and confirm that I have absolutely no soul at all. I realized very quickly that the most efficient way to deal with gimmicks was Dark Void, and as such, Smeargle was a perfect pick. Spiky Shield is also very self-explanatory. And I'm gonna just say that in my original script, when I just glanced at what I had on my Smeargle, I just assumed I had Follow Me, since that made perfect sense. I saw a normal type move, 2 words. Yeah, of course, that's Follow Me. It wasn't Follow Me. That was Fake Out. Like, yeah, I get that Fake Out Geomancy was a meme, because like, you lead Smeargle Xerneas, click Fake Out Geomancy, and you've practically won the game from there. But I didn't lead Smeargle Xerneas, like, at all. I always led Kangaskhan pretty much every game with Smeargle. Why would I run Fake Out? What was I thinking? Was I even thinking at all? Oh my god, congrats. Yes, double Fake Out. That's really the play that's gonna revolutionize VGC. Can't believe no one thought of that before. What a genius. Fake Out is supposed to give a safety net so that the other Pokemon can do whatever it wants. By clicking double Fake Out, you accomplish a small amount of chip damage. So obviously, Fake Out, not a good choice. Follow Me or Wide Guard would have been way better instead. I really don't get why I picked Fake Out. And the last move was something I had seen on Lighter that I found absolutely hilarious. Magic Coat was a pretty cool idea, especially in the best of one format. If you don't know what it is, it's Magic Bounce as a move. So that means any status move would be bounced back to the user. That meant I could stop taunts, Thunder Waves, Swaggers, or more importantly, Dark Void. And even funnier than that, if you bounce a Dark Void back, it would hit both of the opponents. The team felt pretty good in testing, and Saturday came quickly. The drive felt much longer than 2 hours. I felt so excited to see what was waiting for me. Montreal's a big city! I was expecting a lot of strong opponents. I remember walking in, seeing everyone writing down their team sheets and talking to each other. I remember trying to sit in a spot that was slightly isolated. That way no one would be able to see my team sheet as I was filling it. I remember when I submitted that the organizer saw the magic coat on Smeargle and made a comment along the lines of, "Oh, interesting." I remember sitting close to a group of people but couldn't really insert myself into the conversation. We got the announcement for the start of the tournament. we had 17 Masters, which meant 5 rounds of Swiss and a top cut of 8 players. Unfortunately, I will be missing a lot of info on my opponents this tournament since I've lost my notes, but thankfully for most of those I still have my replays.
Unfortunately, round 1 is one of those rounds where I have absolutely nothing. I don't remember the name of my opponent. I only vaguely remember maybe seeing a Mega Mawile, and I remember a Thundurus, mainly because I very clearly remember my first tournament turn. And as much as I could recreate this moment in game, I think that recreating it in paint is going to do it justice way better than anything in game ever could. I let Smeargle and Kangaskhan, and my opponent let Thundurus and I don't remember what. So let's go with Missing though, because it doesn't matter what it was. I predicted a taunt into the Smeargle, so my turn was very obvious. I went in with the Mega Evolution on Kangaskhan. Kangaskhan went for the Fake Out into the Missing though. Clap, clap. And Smeargle went for Magic Coat, hoping to bounce the taunt back into the Thundurus. Except that it wasn't a taunt. It was a swagger. One of us had fun.
And it wasn't my opponent.
I won the game and I started my first tournament 1-0.
I don't remember too much of what I did between rounds 1 and 2. Well, I'm guessing that I probably did my best to calm my nerves, because I really wasn't expecting to win my first round. I was probably asking myself the typical questions in my head. Am I going to keep it up? Was it just a fluke? Where's the bathroom? Okay, now I'm ready for round 2.
That match went, I figured that I'd explain a little how the main approach to team preview looks like, since I know a lot of newcomers struggle with it. The main thing you aim for in team preview is identifying your and your opponent's win conditions. In restricted formats, it tends to be easy because they're normally the restricted Pokemon, and finding out how to best enable them with the rest of your team. With the lead, you want to have the most flexibility possible by finding what gives you the best mix of having a lot of your own options and the best way to limit your opponent's options. Moves can normally be categorized into ones that improve your options and those that limit your opponent's actions. For example, Fake Out, Taunt, and picking up KOs are examples to limit an opponent's actions, while things like setting up your speed control or using a setup move like Swords Dance improve your options.
Kangaskhan is a Pokemon that I like to lead a lot in 2016 because of its flexibility. It could threaten KOs on turn 1 with Return or Sucker Punch. It can Fake Out, allowing other Pokemon to go for whatever it wants more easily, offset opposing Fake Outs, or help make a switch safer. Or it could punish more passive leads by increasing its attack with a power-up punch. Talonflame is another Pokemon that I really like to lead with, because it also gave me a lot of flexibility, either by shutting down opposing options thanks to Taunt and Quick Guard, or improving mine with Tailwind. It also offered respectable offensive pressure with Brave Bird. You pair them together, and you have a Pokemon duo that can handle almost anything sent their way, either by shutting down most of their options, or by being able to go on the offensive from the beginning. In the rare cases where those two would be stuck in a bad turn 1, Fake Out allowed me to switch out Talonflame to bring in something that could handle everything much better.
Just like every other team preview in this video, there won't be 6 Pokemon because I don't know or remember what the 6 are, so I'll only show you the confirmed Pokemon. From those 5 alone, you know that this is a Talonflame game. Double Fake Out, Extreme Speed Rayquaza, Whimsicott, it was made for this.
Outside of that, there isn't much to say about the other 3. Pair it with Kangaskhan as a lead, bring the 2 restricted Pokemon in the back. There isn't much of a reason to deviate from the standard plan. With that lead, I felt pretty confident that the Fake Out was coming somewhere, so Quick Guard felt safe. And by using Quick Guard, if I click Fake Out, I basically am trying to force myself to guess which Pokemon isn't clicking Fake Out. I'm better off using Return into his Kangaskhan to do enough damage to put it in range of whatever I want after.
His Kangaskhan Mega Evolves first, which means that either it's faster or we're speed tying. Considering my weird EV spread, I'm probably slower, but I think that's going to be safer to assume that if he also attacks first, since it would have meant that he won the speed tie twice in a row. Okay, we got the fake out correctly. Yeah, losing the Talonflame here isn't ideal. The fact that his Kangaskhan Mega Evolved means that he can't Mega Evolve the Rayquaza anymore, which is big for me. I don't want my Xerneas to be paralyzed by a Raichu's potential Nuzzle since I'm going to need it for the Rayquaza, so switching Groudon in looks like my best option. With his Kangaskhan being that low, he probably expects me to go for a Sucker Punch to finish it off. That means that he would go for Sucker Punch, both to get the last attack off since he would probably assume that I'd be clicking Precipice Blades, and to prevent my Sucker Punch from working. I decided to call that and went for a Power Up Punch into the Raichu to help me in future turns, and went for a Precipice Blade since I wanted to cover for Raichu clicking Volt Switch to bring in the Kyogre on top of threatening a double KO. There's the Sucker Punch as we expected. And here's the Volt Tackle? Oh, that's not a Volt Switch. This is slightly awkward. Both restricted Pokemon coming in here would be bad for me to deal with if the Kyogre is faster. Rayquaza can use Extreme Speed to pick up the Kangaskhan, and Kyogre can pick up the Groudon with a Water Spout if that's the case. If I try to switch Xerneas in, it would take too much damage to make a big difference. I probably lose this match. Oh, never mind then. No Rayquaza was weird, but something I will happily take since my position now goes from horrible to amazing. Now, if I switch to Groudon out, there is very little that a Kyogre would be able to do since Desolate Land will stop all of its water type attacks, and I think I went for a Sucker Punch into the Kyogre to cover for a Moonblast from Whimsicott. Encore is good info to have. The fact that I probably clicked Sucker Punch means that I have no idea if my Kangaskhan is actually faster than Kyogre, which could be useful if I faced him again in TopKec, or to know if my Groudon might be faster than Kyogre, but it's not the end of the world. At least a Power Up Punch did enough damage where even if Groudon is KO'd, I don't really need to worry about the Water Spout too much. The only way this could get awkward is if the Whimsicott is Worry Seed, since it could cancel out the Desolate Land, but considering the fact that the team has Rayquaza, I would have been very surprised if it had it. I don't want to go for the Geomancy since Xerneas would just get Encore the following turn, so I went for the Fire Punch into Whimsicott and Dazzling Gleam. Yep, a Protect here is great. Sure, I'll take a Taunt, whatever. That's one, that's two, and that's a drop Whimsicott. From there, I don't need to overcomplicate things. Missing a few Precipice Blades is basically the only way I can lose this game. Since Groudon can take 2 Ice Beams very easily, I can just go for Fire Punch and Moonblast. Oh, nice. We even decide to rub some salt into the wound by getting the Fire Punch burn. That was not the cleanest game, but a win is a win. I didn't play great, but I play less poorly than my opponent, which is all that you need sometimes. I was now 2-0, still beating my expectations. I once again barely remember what happened between rounds outside of being nervous and going to the bathroom again. I think I went to the bathroom between every round, so I'll just mention it again this time and I'll stop from now on. At some point, round 3 pairings went up. I don't remember my opponent's name, so we'll just call him by his in-game name, Grizzly. Grizzly was actually pretty nice. I remember that we talked for a bit before we were told we could start our match. We talked about how it was my first tournament and now I had driven 2 hours for it, how he decided to enter with a fun team, and in the conversation I ended up bringing up at some point that I quit for a half a year because of Smeargle. We got into team preview and my eyes practically jumped out of their sockets. I don't remember what the last 2 Pokemon were, but I know that they were also water type. My mind was screaming, Jank! Jank! So I knew I was going to lead Kang and Smeargle. As much as Mono Water seemed easy, a lot of things about it seemed extremely annoying. Quillfish had Swift Swim and could pressure Xerneas with Poison Jab or Haze. Golduck was Cloud9, which could make Groudon easy to KO. As much as it seemed like I should be able to beat a Mono Water team, I had to give it more respect than it looks. Especially since it's a team that also started 2-0. Despite everything I just said, bringing both restricted Pokemon in the back was my best option. Fake out Kyogre and Dark Void was safe, especially since Mega Swampert's Swift Swim doesn't take effect until turn 2, which means that Smeargle would outspeed it guaranteed. He went for a double protect turn 1, which is a double-edged sword for him because the more passive you play, the more you give Smeargle the opportunity to get good moody boosts, like that. This is the best case scenario for Smeargle. I only needed to click Dark Void with it and hope to dodge one of the 2 attacks. With Kangaskhan, I figured that return into Kyogre would be a safe play. Swampert goes for Earthquake? Oh hey, Smeargle dodges. That did half to Kyogre. Origin Pulse, oh, Smeargle dodged again. Wait, Kyogre went before Kangaskhan? That's timid max speed. Okay, and that's basically losing the Kangaskhan for nothing. Remember the joke from earlier about how you bring in Smeargle and Xerneas together and the game is practically won? This is basically what happened. So instead of wasting your time by pretending that there's any kind of intelligent analysis left in a game that was so non-interactive, I could describe it as a single player game. Here's a funny montage that best showcases the horrors committed during the remainder of this match. You're the one who said that Smeargle made you quit for half a year? Yep. And now you know why. As you can tell, one of us had fun. And once again, it wasn't my opponent. The fact that I was now 3-0 was very nice because basically it meant that I could lose the final 2 rounds and probably still make it into the top 8 because my tiebreaker was likely going to be enough.
I don't remember what happened between rounds 3 and 4, but eventually, round 4 pairings went up, and I was paired against someone with an in-game name of Swaggy B. I don't have any interesting stories to say about him, so let's just skip to team preview. Basically, I don't really see any reason to deviate from the standard lead. Kangaskhan is always going to be led. Talonflame looks amazing for quick guarded to Thunderous, taunted to Gengar, setting speed control up, and from there obviously both restricteds in the back. A very standard game plan. Okay, so looking at his lead, I figured that the Gengar is probably going to go for a Will-O-Wisp into Kangaskhan, and I'd rather not risk anything with Thunderous, so I'm just going to fake it out and taunt the Gengar. Okay, so there's no Protect from either of his Pokemon. The fake out goes off fine, and the taunt goes off fine. Okay, so that was a taunt and not a Will-O-Wisp. So the Sucker Punch into Gengar looks extremely obvious. So it's probably going to be switching out. And Thunderous doesn't really have anything better to do but click Thunder Wave. So I'm going to click Quick Guard to stop the Thunder Wave, and I'm going to return the Thunderous to pick it up. There's the switch out. Here's a Quick Guard. Here's a Thunder Wave. And read like a book. I figured that I'm gonna see another Will-O-Wisp, but this time, since the Gengar is faster than Talonflame, since it has Mega Evolved already, I can't taunt it to prevent it. So my best play is to cover just in case he goes for a Protect, and return the Groudon and set a Tailwind. There's two ground weak Pokemon here. There's no way I'm not switching in Groudon. Considering how defensive he had been with his Gengar, I figured that he might try to switch in the Xerneas in the Gengar slot, so I went for the Brave Bird and Precipice Blades to cover for that. Yeah, on that turn, my opponent went for a double Protect to stall out a Tailwind turn, which makes complete sense. Since he saw that I went for the Brave Bird into Gengar, I knew that he wasn't going to switch Xerneas there, so I went for the Brave Bird into the Groudon instead to cover for a Precipice Blades miss, since missing the Groudon would be more costly than missing the Gengar. I went for a Precipice Blades again because that's clearly my best play. Brave Bird did a lot of chip. Oh, and I actually missed a Precipice Blades. Wow. I figured that I'd probably be dealing with a double Protect here, but just in case, I figured that I'd go for a Precipice Blades and I'd taunt the Xerneas, since the last thing I need is him going for a Geomancy. Okay, so we see the Protect. Oh wait, and no Protect on Xerneas? Okay, then we get the taunt off. And the Precipice Blades. Okay, that does slightly less than half. And yeah, good thing we taunted, he was going for the Geomancy. Since Tailwind just expired and I have no clue on which Groudon is faster, I have no drawback from clicking Protect on Groudon and Tailwind with Talonflame. Tailwind goes up. Wait, that's a grass knot on Xerneas. Okay, and Fire Punch from Groudon pretty much means that there's no Rock Slide from it, since that would have picked up the Talonflame. In hindsight, I don't really agree with my play, but I went for the Precipice Blades again and Brave Birded to Groudon again. Uh-oh, there's a Protect on Groudon. And yep, the Precipice Blades doesn't KO. And I just lost my Groudon for free. I said that I didn't really agree with this turn in hindsight. Let me explain why. At the time, I realized that losing Groudon for free was bad, and getting pretty much nothing for it also was. In reality though, that was pretty much the tip of the iceberg. I pretty much went from a position where I had a guaranteed win to a position where my opponent now had a very small chance of winning. And while it still didn't look good for him, a 1 in a million chance is better than 0. The taunt expiring on Xerneas means that he can now get a lot of protects in a row with both Pokemon in order to stall out the remaining Tailwind turns. It's not a very realistic win condition, but it's still a win condition. I should have clicked Fire Punch into the Xerneas to make sure that I would pick up the KO and remove it from the equation, since it couldn't protect. While Precipice Blaze has a higher base power of 120 compared to Fire Punch's 75, crit attacks have a damage reduction if it targets multiple Pokemon. Immunities and Protect doesn't stop them from counting as targets, which gives Precipice Blaze an effective base power of 90. Meanwhile, Fire Punch's power gets a boost because of the sun, giving it a base power of 107 rounded down. That difference would have been enough to pick up the Xerneas. I understand that I was worried that a low roll from Brave Bird wouldn't pick up the Groudon, but I shouldn't have been, because the outcomes from this turn could be summed up in 3 categories, assuming Brave Bird wouldn't KO. Groudon protects, Groudon picks up the Talonflame, Groudon doesn't pick up the Talonflame. If Groudon protects, I get into the most complicated outcome, which still remains fairly simple. As long as Tailwind is up, I click Fire Punch on Brave Bird. If he doesn't manage to protect for enough turns to stall out the Tailwind, I win. If he does manage to do that, I set Tailwind up again and click Fire Punch. Since it's pretty much confirmed that he doesn't have Rock Slide, it means that I don't have to be worried about a KO and a flinch, which might be the only thing that can cost me the game. Fire Punch shouldn't pick up his Groudon, but it safely puts it into KO range for pretty much anything. There are a few things that he can do from there, and I'll explain the different outcomes. If my Groudon gets to click Fire Punch and Talonflame isn't KO'd, Brave Bird. It picks up, and there's nothing you can do from there. My Groudon is KO'd before it can Fire Punch. I click Brave Bird with Talonflame and Geomancy with Xerneas. He can't KO both at once, and Geomancy covers for the protects. If my Talonflame is KO'd, Xerneas will always be faster and will KO the Groudon. If for some odd reason Xerneas is KO'd, it shouldn't even with a crit, Talonflame wins with a second Brave Bird. If Talonflame is KO'd, the plan becomes the exact same thing as the original outcome 2, where his Groudon picks up my Talonflame. So let's cover both of those at once. At this point, his Groudon barely has any HP left. I can safely click Fire Punch for the KO, and Geomancy to cover for the scenario where he gets enough protects in a row to stall out the Tailwind. If he does manage to stall out the Tailwind, I can choose to protect with Xerneas to figure out which Groudon is faster in case I play him in TopCec, since that would be fairly likely since we're a 3-0 match. And in the case of the original outcome number 3, I just have to click Brave Bird. It doesn't matter what the Pokemon next to it is, as long as I don't self-target, Talonflame wins. People often talk about how you should learn from your losses, but this is a good example of why you should also look at your wins. If you want to be good, you don't just want to win, you want to do it consistently. This is a perfect example of a way to win that you don't want to do consistently. The difference between losing Groudon bad and this is in big part why I wasn't able to use positioning heavy teams well, and why I went with more aggressive teams at the beginning. Funnily enough though, I could have actually picked up the Xerneas with 2 Precipice Blades normally, but I made a mistake that I found out about only after the tournament. I'll share that mistake at the end of the video because the story on how I found out is way too funny to just share in passing. Okay, now that tangent has lasted long enough. Now let's go back to the match. Despite the fact that I just made a big deal out of this mistake, my position really isn't all that bad. I can just click Dazzling Gleam and Brave Bird into the Groudon, and I'm still pretty much guaranteed to win as long as he doesn't get enough protects. Oh hey, he didn't go for any protects, which means that I win. I'm not sure if he didn't see his win condition or if he was just scared of going for it. I know that a lot of players tend to be scared of going for low odd win conditions, especially if they're reliant on luck. But unless you genuinely expect them to choke, you're way better off with taking a chance. I was now 4-0, the only 4-0. That meant that I was guaranteed to make it into the top 8. It also meant that I was going to approach round 5 differently from the previous rounds. For the previous rounds, I was obviously trying to win. I mean, who wouldn't? It might sound weird, but that wasn't going to be my goal for round 5 though. A win in round 5 doesn't earn me anything. There's only one thing that I can get from that match: information. Nowadays, matches are open team sheet, which means that the items and moves for each Pokemon are shown to you before the match even begins. That wasn't the case back in 2016. Even in open team sheet though, there is information that you can gather mid-match, such as EV spreads and player habits. I wasn't good enough to be able to tell much when it came to the EV spreads based on damage calcs, so there wasn't much I could do for that. But I could try to get info on how my opponent plays, and try to hide how I typically play. I don't remember too much about his team outside of Mega Audino and Heatran. I decided to go with a Kangaskhan and Bronzong lead since I didn't go with it once today, and looking at his team, I felt like it could work, but it wouldn't be how I would typically approach a matchup, since looking at how janky it was, I probably would have led Smeargle instead. Unfortunately, I didn't save the match, so I won't really go into detail about it. I lost though, and I remember people crowding around us and popping off when he won. I'm not surprised that most people were done when we finished, because I'm pretty sure that I tried to prolong the game as much as I could by avoiding to make reads as much as possible, since I knew I played a read heavy game, and the fact that I would be playing very differently if we met in TopKec would have caught him off guard, and to try to squeeze out as much info from the match as I could. I found it extremely odd that people were celebrating the fact that it took this long for someone to beat that guy at his first tournament, especially since it didn't seem like that guy's first tournament considering how he seemed to be friends with a lot of the people there. We didn't have to wait for long to get the standings. My name was easy to find. I was at the top of the standings, the first seed, the man to beat. Not long after the standings were shared, the organizer asked, "Do you guys want to take a break before TopKec?" Nah, I just want to get home as soon as I can. I can't be the only one who... Okay, now it's personal. They want someone to cheer against? I will give them someone to cheer against. I will destroy every single person who wants to kill my momentum so hard that they will never forget this moment. I will win so convincingly that their life's mission will be to try to take me down every single time they see me from this day onwards. I will... You know, it's really not that deep, right? You just want to take a break to relax before TopKec? Sure. Give them a break before I break them. Give them the chance to think of their final words. You know what? Fine. Whatever gives you motivation. You're right, they're out there to get you. That was the only reason why they chose to take a break. Become the villain they want you to be, or something. You really are me. You understand me. Thank you. You chose a perfect moment to start talking to me again. Whatever. I decided to tag along with my round 1 opponent and his friend. He didn't make TopKec, but his friend did. We exited the venue and walked along the street looking for a restaurant. Oh hey, a Subway! I wonder if they still have it. Still have what? The subscribe? The what? No, that's never been a thing. What are you even talking about? You might not get it, but I'm pretty sure at least someone does. Great, we found a weirdo. Obviously, this didn't happen, but if you don't get the message at this point, I don't know what to say. We stopped at La Belle Province and grabbed a poutine. Unsurprisingly, it was really good. We talked for a bit, and I found out that the guy who TopKec the tournament was also from Gatineau, and I was going to see him at the PC there the following week. Both of them were pretty cool. I probably would have felt very nervous about TopKec in normal circumstances, but considering the fact that I was a top seed, I had the confidence that if I kept it up, I could take it all. Was my confidence justified, or was it a false sense of security? Let's head back to the venue to find out. I was going to face the 8th seed, someone named Matt. As much as I would like to include an interesting story about before the match, Matt was just a very quiet guy in general. He was running Groudon, Kyurem Black, Aegislash, Mienshao, Salamence, and Thundurus. This team preview is much more interesting than it looks. It definitely looks like jank at a glance, with most of the team being out of the ordinary. Kyurem Black and Mienshao are 2 Pokemon that you never saw, and Aegislash didn't see much usage either. That gives the impression that it could be a good Smeargle game, but it's not even good here. Mienshao and Thundurus can get the KO on it before it can do anything, and that's the most likely lead. If he tries to taunt, I have to call if he's going for that or Thunderbolt, and if I try to click Spiky Shield, I have to risk Kangaskhan getting hit by a high jump kick. Anyway, I have 3 games to adjust, and despite the Pokemon being unusual, it feels like his team plays the standard way and doesn't rely on gimmicky strategies, so Kangaskhan and Talonflame seem like a good lead. If I get that wrong, I can use the information from this game to adapt for games 2 and 3. I don't have the first 2 games recorded, but I'll put it this way. Game 1 was as straightforward as it gets. It went as well as it could, to the point that I just locked the same 4 for game 2 immediately. As for game 2, I lost to getting fully paralyzed for 4 turns in a row. For game 3, I hesitated for a moment in team preview. Did I need to adjust anything? Can I avoid being put in the exact situation for game 3? My answer to that was no. I didn't even need to, really. I just needed to be slightly less unlucky with full paralysis. I decided to go for the fake out into the Thundurus and Tailwind. Strictly off this decision, I assumed that I went for the Quick Guard in at least one of the previous games and caught a Thunder Wave. This meant that I knew that I was probably dealing with Thunderbolt into the Talonflame and decided to use the 1 turn I had with it to set up speed control. Fake out into the Kangaskhan isn't a big deal. I would have been way more scared of a high jump kick, so I won't complain. And yep, the Thunderbolt goes off into the Talonflame, and it picks it up. Groudon looks much nicer here because it doesn't matter as much if it gets taunted, and it can't be affected by Thunder Wave because of its ground typing. It is a better option to switch in than Xerneas. In the current situation, Thundurus isn't too much of a threat. Thunder Wave into Kangaskhan is definitely going to be annoying, but there's nothing that I can do to stop that. Mienshao is most likely a supportive set, so it's probably not running Protect. My best option is to double into it since it can pressure a KO into Kangaskhan with high jump kick. Meanwhile, if I let Thundurus be, after this turn, the best it can do is click Thunderbolt into Kangaskhan or whatever coverage move he has to hit Groudon. Fire Punch is the safest play here since I can't miss with it, and if Thundurus switches out into something, Mienshao is probably clicking Wide Guard anyway. Fire Punch should bring Mienshao down to Sash, and any move from Kangaskhan should pick it up from there. I decide to go with Power Up Punch to get more mileage from it in the future turns.
Okay, he switches Mienshao out, and Groudon comes in. Yeah, that's fine. He does go for the Thunder Wave. Thankfully, I'm not fully paralyzed and get to get a boost with my Kangaskhan. I need to click Precipice Blades. Once again, Thundurus is dead weight, and this is a perfect position to try to get rid of Groudon. There's no Wide Guard on the field, and the other Pokemon is dead weight. Kangaskhan goes for the Sucker Punch into the Groudon, since the chip is helpful in case of a Precipice Blade's miss. Full Paralysis is annoying, but it should be fine as long as Precipice Blades hit. Okay, they hit. Good. Thunderbolt hits Kangaskhan and does less than half. Mienshao comes back in. Fake Out probably comes out, so I should have been best off with going for the return into it, but I actually go for the Sucker Punch instead in practice. I can't even tell you which one I went for with it because I was fully paralyzed again, but I can tell you it was a Sucker Punch because the Kangaskhan was fully paralyzed before the Groudon flinched. Groudon flinched because it got faked out, so I do nothing that turn. He goes for another Thunderbolt into the Kangaskhan. Now that Fake Out isn't a factor anymore, I can go for the Sucker Punch into the Mienshao, to at least break the sash. Groudon should be fine here. I click Fire Punch into the Mienshao to make sure I don't miss. Phew, no full para this time. Okay, Sucker Punch almost KOs on its own. The High Jump Kick comes out into the Groudon. Groudon takes it like a champ. And a Hidden Power goes into the Groudon. The damage is low enough that I know I can live another one. And Fire Punch picks up the Mienshao. Agent Slash comes in. I've been waiting for this all day. Let's overheat the sword! And I Sucker Punch the Thunderous. The only annoying thing is that if Overheat misses and I get fully paralyzed, I might lose. But the odds are so in my favor that I can take it as the game not wanting me to win if it does happen. Oh wait, I know how it goes when I say something like that. I'm about to— oh wait, I'm not paralyzed. Yep, the Thunderous goes down. Overheat hits 2. And that's game. That was much closer than I would have liked. Even now, I still think that I was pretty much in control for the entire set, but Thunder Wave and the risk of getting fully paralyzed certainly had me sweating. At least I was now moving to the top 4, where I was meeting a familiar face. I was going to have a rematch against Swaggy B, my opponent from round 4. This team preview went by very quickly. I won last time. I don't see any reason to adjust, so let's just run it back. Just like top 8, I only have the final game of top 4, and I'm pretty sure that top 4 also went to game 3. If it did, it went the exact same way as top 8 did. I won game 1 very convincingly, while game 2, the game decided that I wasn't allowed to play again. Was I going to adjust for game 3? I went 2 games out of 3 in the matchup with those 4, and really should have won all 3. So, no. So he leaves Thunderous and Togekiss this time. I knew that Togekiss wasn't going to be the threat, so I can fake out a Thunderous instead. On paper, I could do a lot with Talonflame. Taunt, Brave Bird, Tailwind. Looking at how I handled the turns after, I think that Taunt into the Thunderous so I could force it to KO Talonflame on turn 2 as I said Tailwind would be the best case scenario. That way, I would be able to maximize Tailwind turns with Kangaskhan in a restricted Pokemon. Instead, I went with Tailwind, probably to force him into a position where he would feel forced to click Thunder Wave with his Thunderous to deal with Kangaskhan. Fake Out goes off. Tailwind goes up. Thunderous flinches. And Togekiss uses Air Slash. Nothing too out of the ordinary there. I go for the quick guard, expecting him to go for the Thunder Wave. I click return into the Togekiss, since redirection once a restricted Pokemon would come in would be very annoying, especially if it's Xerneas. Quick guard goes off. Togekiss goes for the follow me. Thunder Wave is stopped, and I get the return into the Togekiss, activating the Citrus Berry in the process. I assume that he's not going to click Thunder Wave again, so I go for the Brave Bird into Togekiss. I assume that it probably doesn't pick it up, but getting a critical hit, or if I'm lucky, a high roll, would be the only way that I would get anything more than a KO Togekiss at the end of the turn. I select Return with Kangaskhan, since I don't want to be greedy with Power Up Punch with it and fail to KO the Togekiss in the process. He goes for Follow Me again. Brave Bird. Fails to KO. Kangaskhan finishes the job. And I trade my Talonflame for it. For the same reasoning as last round, Groudon is a much better choice to switch in here than the Xerneas. I should have learned my lesson by now and doubled the Xerneas. I expected a Protect, so I decided to click Return into the Thundurus, but considering how the only pressure it could apply is from a guaranteed Thunder Wave, I shouldn't be in a hurry to get rid of it. I should have doubled the Xerneas, and if it means waiting a turn to get anything of value, so be it. Remember earlier when I talked about how I was trying to win the turn too hard instead of trying to win the game? This is a perfect example. At least I Fire Punched the Xerneas. He gets the Thunder Wave. I actually would have liked the full Para in hindsight, but I KO the Thundurus. Fire Punch does a good chunk to Xerneas. Xerneas sets up Geomancy. That one expires. This isn't a good spot at all. I remembered that we're talking about the Grass Knot Xerneas and figured that he might try to go for my Groudon with it. I decide to risk it and protect Groudon and hope that I don't get fully paralyzed and survive the Groudon's attack in order to pick up the Xerneas. Grass Knot does go into the Groudon, so I got that part correctly. His Groudon goes for the Precipice Blades, and Kangaskhan lives. And now Kangaskhan isn't paralyzed. And picks up the Xerneas. Sucker Punch. Precipice Blades. I really don't think I need to elaborate. Full Para is slightly annoying. My Groudon attacks first. I hit, which basically guarantees my win. I didn't expect it to live, but at least that's in Fire Punch range. And now I should live a spread Precipice Blades unless there's a critical hit. Thankfully, there's none. Fire Punch, Geomancy. I can't miss, and I cover for a Protect or a Speed tie. I go first. I win. And I move on to the finals. I reported the result of the set, and I quickly found out who I was going to face. It was going to be another rematch. This time, I was going to be facing HUD again, my round 2 opponent. Before the start of the set, my opponent decided to go to the bathroom. I didn't think much of it at the time, since I also went to the bathroom frequently that day, mostly because of the nerves. I didn't know it at the time, but after game 1 of our set, he told me that he was thinking of a game plan in there. Obviously, I wasn't there, but this is how I imagine it went. Alright troops, this is it! Our toughest battle yet! He might have beaten us last time, but he didn't go undefeated to get here. That means that he can bleed. And if he can bleed, we can make him bleed. We've made it this far. That means we can take it all the way. Who's with me? Good! Here's the plan! Should I eat dinner before leaving here, or should I wait until I get home before eating? I did get a percent before cut, and it would cost me more in parking. But I am going to get home pretty late.
I waited until I got home.
Now let's go to war!
You guys can begin whenever. When he sat down, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I had been nervous all day, and the few moments where I had felt confident in TopKec, the game decided to kick me down a peg and put as much pressure on me as possible. But one glance at him was enough to remove the nerves. He was much more nervous than I had been all day. I knew that I was in his head, and that gave me the confidence of knowing that I was in the driver's seat. As for team preview, it wasn't complicated at all. He's scared! Let's give him exactly what he's afraid of. Let's lock immediately, and now let's push the mental advantage. I stopped looking at my DS and stare at him directly in the eyes. No words need to be said. My look says it all. What's taking so long? I'm already done picking! I don't have Game 1's replay, but I know that I read him so hard every turn that he shared with me that he went to the bathroom to come up with a game plan and that I completely demolished it. I have an idea of what happened and how much I was in his head just based on how game 2 went. I didn't change anything for game 2. I was completely in his head. Might as well take advantage of that. He returned to the Swiss match lead of Raichu and Kangaskhan. I went for the fake out into the Raichu and Brave Bird into the Kangaskhan. I knew that he expected me to call out a fake out on his end with a quick guard again and would try to punish me for that, and I figured that he wouldn't target my Talonflame with his Kangaskhan. His Kangaskhan Mega Evolving means that he can't Mega Evolve his Rayquaza anymore. I get the fake out correctly, and Brave Bird puts his Kangaskhan in the range of another one. His return goes into my Kangaskhan, which takes it with over 25% left. Considering how the sash was on Whimsicott, I can assume that the Raichu is Assault Vest, which means that I don't have to worry about Encore. Sucker Punch into the Raichu and Brave Bird into the Kangaskhan should be a double KO. Okay, that fake out was very cool. He did it on purpose to not get hit by the Sucker Punch, which allows Raichu to live for another turn. Ironically enough though, I think that him losing his Raichu and switching both of his restricted Pokemon in would have made the situation much trickier for me. And unsurprisingly, Brave Bird picks up the Kangaskhan. I went for the Sucker Punch into the Raichu again, and I went for the Tailwind. I'm not sure if I actually knew that it was the best option, but I think that part of what cemented the decision was the fact that he was still scared of Quick Guard. Because I'm pretty sure that I did call an Extreme Speed coming in game 1 and got the Quick Guard correctly. Tailwind goes first, which confirms the lack of Extreme Speed. Sucker Punch picks up the Raichu this time, and Dragon Ascent goes into the Kangaskhan. That's fine, it did its job. Airlock means that Groudon would still be vulnerable to water moves, and with the special defense drop from Dragon Ascent and the Life Orb recoil, I was pretty confident that Rayquaza was in Dazzling Gleam range. That means that Xerneas is a better choice here. I go for the Dazzling Gleam because it should pick up the Rayquaza while also hitting the Kyogre. And because I've got Rayquaza where I want it, I go for the Brave Bird into the Kyogre for more damage, which also means that Water Spout wouldn't be an option anymore. Rayquaza protects. Kyogre is now very low. Origin Pulse hits both, but Xerneas should still be safe from an extreme speed. Looking at Kyogre's health, I'm pretty sure that it's in Fire Punch range, so I don't know why I clicked Precipice Blades. Dazzling Gleam is correct though. Xerneas would have lived even a crit extreme speed. Of course, Precipice Blades misses. And Dazzling Gleam picks up both. I did it. I did it! I won! What? Already? But he normally wins everything! Not this time. Wow, I guess that Guess Who Knows Best is really good. I don't even know if that's me. Today was my first tournament. I'll find out next week. The 2-hour drive back was something that I needed. There was too much that had to sink in. I was rooted against. Someone had to mentally prepare to face me. I had somehow come out on top. That shouldn't be a first tournament experience. It should have been something that happened years down the line. It's normal that I found it weird. It was the first official tournament ever in Montreal, and coming from this far while performing at the level I did throughout the day, I had everyone fooled, even the organizer, into thinking that I was a veteran. I might as well have been though compared to the rest of the field. Despite the win, I was still at only 20 points out of the 500 needed to qualify for the World Championships. It might have been a small bit of progress, but I did win something bigger. On that day, for a moment, while being stuck behind another car going 20 below the speed limit on that one-lane highway, I was allowed to dream that this was the start of something, and that maybe, just maybe, I could actually make it to the World Championships, and that this was just the beginning. As much as I would like to say that I had more self-reflection from there, it couldn't be further from the truth. I was just thinking of which way I would tell my parents that I had actually won the tournament, especially since I knew that the first thing they would say would be, "Did you win?" Was I going to ignore them? Or maybe pretend that I didn't win and suddenly reveal the Arceus plush that I had won? I decided to keep it fairly simple. Hi, I'm home! Hi, did you win? Yes! Congratulations! And that's how my Pokemon World journey started. Wait, I'm not done yet! I'm supposed to explain what happened with Groudon. Let me introduce you all to an expression that I've used a lot over the past few years. Allergic to winning. Throwing so hard that it looks like it's on purpose. As if winning would cost you your life. I normally use this expression when talking about plays, but if I did a segment for that every time, it would get old quickly. So instead, I'll only make a segment for what I call round 0 mistakes. Mistakes that happened before the tournament even started. If you're very observant, you would have noticed it when I presented the team. The Groudon had 404 attack instead of the 438 that a max attack Groudon should have at level 100. If you didn't notice, don't worry, I didn't either. The only reason I found out was because I traded the Groudon to Logan to help him practice taking notes, and he realized that the Groudon was doing less damage than it should. He asked me if I had EV trained it properly. I knew I did, so I was confused. Then it hit me. I asked him to check the IV judge. And that's how my Pokemon World journey actually started. By winning a tournament with a 0 attack IV Groudon,